this session, this is a focus group discussion on way forward to strengthen the regulatory framework for DR in India. So the moderator for this session is Mr. Ashok Kumar Rajput, member, Power Systems CA. So, okay. So in the meantime, we have the theme presentation by Kulbhushan sir, whose partner Grant Thurman Bharat LLP. Sir, may I request you to please come on stage. And for sir, this I would request if the PPT can be finished in like 10 minutes, okay? Sorry. And the panelist for this session is Mr. S.C. Saxena. He is Executive Director, Grid Controller of India. I welcome you, sir. The next panelist for this session is Mr. Rajesh Dangi, sir. He is Secretary, Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission. Welcome you, sir. The next panelist for this session is Mr. Mukesh Dadish. He is Head Sustainability and Clean Technology, BSS Yamuna Power Limited. Welcome, sir. The next panelist for this session is Mr. G. Ganesh Das. He is Chief Collaboration and Innovation, Tata Power Company Limited. Welcome, sir. The next panelist for this session is Mr. Amit Kumar Singh Parihar. He is Director, Clean Power, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. Welcome, sir. And the next panelist for the session is Mr. Avnish Kumar. He is AVP BSS Rajdhani Power Limited. Welcome, sir. Avnish sir, का उधर लगा? While Sir Rajput sir is joining us, sir, if you want to like to give the presentation, so you can go ahead with your presentation, then we'll start with the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kulbhushan Kumar. I'm partner in Grant Thornton Bharat, and this is as part of the project which we are doing with GIZ on demand response. We have come up with our responses or suggestions on demand response regulation. As we heard in the morning, there are regulatory barriers, and one of the solutions to overcome those regulatory barriers is to come up with a model regulation, one can say that, but we are not calling it a model regulation because we have not discussed as of now with any of the regulator, and therefore that's why we are calling it a suggestions on the demand response regulation. And I'll cover that briefly. What are the aspects we have covered as part of that suggestion on demand response regulation, and then we will have a session discussing about the various clauses and various aspects of the regulation. Can I have the presentation, please? Okay, sure. So, as part of my presentation, I would be covering what is the need to come up with these suggestions, or you call it a model demand response regulation. And as part of the suggestions, we have identified the roles and responsibility of various stakeholders. And one important stakeholders which we have included, which is not a part of the many of the regulations on this particular aspect, is a demand response aggregator. So I'll cover in detail the need to come up with demand response aggregator and what are the roles and responsibility which will be played by them, and then also how to design the DR program, incentive to the distribution companies as well as to the consumer overall as part of this suggestion. Now coming to the need for regulation on demand response, as we heard in the morning, my colleague has also presented and many of the speakers have mentioned, there are already regulations in the country where demand response has been mentioned, And also, I would say that we have separate regulation covering ancillary services to be provided by the demand response. We have separate regulation covering emergency services to be provided by demand response. And we have a separate regulation on the tariff part. Then why is there is a need to come up with a separate regulation on demand response, which when we already have so many regulations in the country? So just to answer that, as we know, demand response can be classified into regulatory demand response and the technological demand response. When we talk about regulatory demand response, the time of day, dynamic tariff, real-time tariff, we already have a regulation, which is your Electricity Right of Consumers, Rule 2020. So we are not touching, as part of this regulation, any regulatory demand response. That is one thing which I wanted to mention. Now we have a separate regulation on the ancillary services to be provided. We have Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, Indian Electricity Grid Code regulation. We also have a Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, ancillary services regulation. We are also not including these services as part of this regulation. The last question which comes into the mind is that we also have a demand side management regulation. So why is there is a need to have a DR regulation when there is already a regulation on DSM? And DR is a part of DSM. So I would like to give a very simple example. I like to explain why do we need to have a separate regulation on demand response. So I'll take an example of an air conditioner. Now there are three ways I can say. First, I will explain the difference between energy efficiency and energy conservation. So how I can save energy? One is that I can replace this air conditioner with a more efficient one. So that will help me to save energy, and we call it as a energy efficiency. Second option is that I can switch off this AC when it is not required. We call it as a energy conservation. It's not energy efficiency, but we are conserving energy. Third is that I can increase the set temperature of the AC. That is also, I'm saving some energy. Or I can also shift the timing. So point which I wanted to make is that when you are replacing the AC with a more efficient one, that is energy efficiency, everything is covered under DSM. But when you are using the use of technology to actually not reducing the demand when not required or optimizing it, then we are calling it as a demand response. That particular aspect is, there is a huge difference between the two. From the utility perspective, if we look at, when I'm replacing AC with a more efficient one, there is a reduction in energy consumption or a demand of a utility, and obviously there would be some loss of revenue as well, because that demand you have reduced throughout the day. There would be some period of the time when your cost of power is less than the tariff, and then you're losing the revenue. When you are actually switching off the AC during the peak hours, then there is no loss of revenue to the utility, because they are procuring power at a higher than the actual tariff which they are charging. So there is no loss. So we want to differentiate these two aspects and these are called demand response. You are trying to reduce the peak and there is no loss of revenue to the utility. You are trying to shift the demand towards the off-peak time. There is no loss to the utility. So DR is, therefore, there is a need to consider them separately. And in order to implement demand response, you require a new stakeholder which is called aggregator. Now, in order to implement energy efficiency or DSM, or replacing AC with a more efficient one, you don't require you may require an ESCO, but may not require an ESCO. Utilities have implemented a lot of DSM program, large-scale DSM program has been implemented without involving any third party on an ESCO. You come up with a scheme, consumer will buy it through the scheme, through the vendor, and implement it. But implementing a demand response, particularly with the residential consumer, requires a process which takes its own time and effort, and then there is a need to have that third party who can later on in the future can sell that power in the market as well. So you need to aggregate, you need to speak to the various residential consumers, create the awareness, sign an agreement with them, and then only you can implement it. It's not that simple as DSM is. So therefore, there is a need to have a separate regulation on demand response, and we have also covered various aspects, like how to design the DR program as part of this regulation, the roles and responsibility as I mentioned, incentive mechanism, consumer participation and data privacy, and the consumer complaint rules. What we have not covered, as I mentioned, we are not touching upon ancillary services, we are not touching upon the TOD tariff, because there are already regulations in the country. Now, need for demand aggregator, as I mentioned, I briefly already touched upon it, and we require an aggregator in the country so that it can actually aggregate the demand of the consumers and their appliances into a unified entity. Once you have that unified entity, that will help us to participate in the energy market through demand bidding, and also participate in the electricity market on behalf of the aggregated consumers. And also, aggregator is going to help us to collect, analyze the data from various consumers, have an agreement with them, and educate them so that they can participate in those events. Whereas in energy efficiency, if the consumer replaces the existing one with a more efficient one, after that there is no need to have any interaction with the consumer for anything. But whereas demand response, there will be many events in a year, and you need to be in touch with the consumer, you need to educate them about the incentive, and also you require another thing which I wanted to mention, you also require a separate monitoring and verification protocol. Whereas there is a separate monitoring and verification required for DSM, but demand response requires a complete different protocol altogether. You have to, as we heard, you have to analyze the past 10-day data of a consumer, and after the DR event, how much is the reduction. So you have to capture all that information, analyze it, then based on that you can decide what would be the incentive, how much is the reduction, and what should be the incentive to be given to the consumer. Therefore, it needs to be considered separately, and internationally also in all the countries, they have separate regulation on demand response, as well as they have a separate regulation on the aggregator as well. So we are starting with a demand response regulation. Maybe if required, we have mentioned a regulatory commission can come up. We have defined the process, and maybe there may be a requirement to have a separate regulation for the aggregator also. Now, coming to the roles and responsibility of various stakeholders, first to start with the distribution utility, as distribution utilities are the one who are going to implement it. So they will be the one who would develop a plan, and they would, in a DSM, we have asked utilities to come up and prepare a DSM action plan. In this case, there is a separate methodology which is followed to assess a DR potential in a state or in a utility. And we have requested that distribution company will develop a DR plan similar to DSM plan, because there is a separate methodology which is followed. For this purpose, they will pursue only cost-effective DR projects. Now, in order to assess the DR potential, we have mentioned they can hire an external consultant also, which can help them to develop it. And they need not to accept, and we have also mentioned they can implement it directly or through an aggregator. It's not necessary that distribution company need to implement it through aggregator only. We have kept both the options open, and we have also defined a threshold value. If any aggregator who wants to implement a DR program, the overall combined capacity should not be less than 50 kilowatt, because then it doesn't make sense according to us, but we would like to hear the experts' views on this, what should be the threshold value. And power being a concurrent subject, each and every state can decide about these threshold values and can dispatch the DR resources directly or through an aggregator. Now, coming to the aggregator, the role of the aggregator which we have identified is that they would be the one, first of all, they may come up with their own DR plan and present it and submit it to the distribution company, or they can also identify the programs which has been identified by the distribution utilities and then utilize those programs on its behalf to of its customer. And we have also defined rules and regulations for data privacy and the data security policy, because they would be provided data, confidential data, I can say the private data of the consumers if they want to aggregate the demand. So we have identified they have to keep that data, how to maintain the privacy and the security of the data. And we have also mentioned that they will come up with an agreement which they want to sign with the consumers, and distribution companies will get it approved through the commission, and they have to also need to submit an annual report to the distribution company about how much they have achieved and what are the plans. Now coming to the roles and responsibility of the regulator, we have identified they are the one who are going to, now there is a need to impanel the aggregator. So regulatory commission is the one who would decide, come up with a qualifying requirement, qualification of the aggregator. They will be the one who would be impaneling the DR aggregator. They will also maintain and publish the list of certified DR aggregator in the state, and also can terminate and revoke the demand response aggregator certification. They will be the one who will set any kind of a target to be achieved through demand response, and the guidelines related to cost effectiveness, monitoring verification, and also DR potential assessment. As I mentioned, there is a different methodology which is followed. Now coming to the target, we have given, for the time being, we have given all the options which can be considered to set up the target for the utility on the demand response. But we have also, like, as I would also like to present what has been considered as a target internationally. If take an example of a European Commission, they have mandated that the states to identify 10% of the hours with highest expected price and reduce the electricity consumption by at least 5% during these hours. So as we were, Mr. Ganesh was mentioning that there is very small percentage of the time when the utility takes power at a very high cost. So whatever may be that percentage, if that some percentage reduction in that can be done through demand response, that will be great achievement for, but we have also mentioned other parameters also which can be considered to set a target for the utilities. And obviously we have mentioned that these targets has to be set based on the demand response potential assessment study carried out by the utility. Based on that only this target can be set. Now, as I mentioned, yes, there would be some saving for the utility, and there will not be any loss of revenue for the utility by implementing demand response. But will that incentive be sufficient, because there would be some administrative cost incurred by the utility when they want to implement a demand response. So there has to be some more incentive which we feel should be given to the utilities if they are being given targets and they have been mandated to implement demand response. And because one of the loss which may happen to the utility is that because of increase in demand, they may invest more capex and upgrade their distribution network. So their investment to upgrade the infrastructure may get reduced to an extent because they have implemented demand response, and demand has not risen to that level, and because of that their return on equity, there would be some loss on the return on equity. So what we have proposed is that they should be given some higher return on equity if they are implementing demand response. We have also given a cap of that, which is 1%. It can be the maximum cap, and that obviously has to be considered by the regulatory commission. So these are our propositions in the suggestions which we have provided as part of the demand response regulation. And then we have covered separately the reporting, evaluation, measurement and verification. Reporting and evaluation is for the demand program. When they come up with a demand response plan, so they need to report to the regulatory commission on a regular basis. They need to evaluate the DR program which has been carried out. Monitoring verification is for the programs which get implemented, and there should be a separate protocol for that. And we have mentioned as of now that regulatory commission will come up with a separate guidelines on cost effectiveness, monitoring verification, as well as on demand response potential assessment. So that's it from my side with respect to the various features of the draft regulation which we have prepared on demand response. I'll now hand it over to Sir, Mr. Shukmar Rajput Sir, to have a discussion on this regulation and take feedbacks of the various panelists and their views on various aspects of the regulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kulbhushan ji. Thank you, Kulbhushan ji, and thank you, audience, and thank you, my panelists here. So I will give only a brief introduction of the panelists because they are already well-known personalities in their field and the experts. So they are Sri S.C. Saxena. He is Executive Director with Grid Controller of India. So their main role is controlling in the real-time domain the total power system or the total grid. Then Sri Rajesh Dangi, he is playing an important role as Secretary DRC, and through the regulations and through other affairs, guiding well in a very disciplined manner to the DISCOMs of Delhi and also the other stakeholders of Delhi, whosoever are the generators, and also for working for the interest of consumers. Sri Mukesh Dadhij, as I know him personally also since long, is heading now the sustainability and clean technology, which is need of the hour, and their major responsibility is to supply the consumers an uninterruptible and quality power. Sri G. Ganesh Das ji, he has already presented one of the items of the today's event. He is head of innovation and R&D and Tata Power Delhi. And I also in my opening remarks touched about the innovation and R&D needs when we have to achieve something better than what is now. Sri Amit Kumar Singh Parihar, he is Director, Clean Power, Shakti Foundation. Shakti Foundation is a think tank. They have carried out various studies and they have brought out many valuable technical and the policy documents also. So now, I have also said in the opening remark and will be mostly repeating the same. Mr. Avinash Kumarji, he is from VRPL and their organization is responsible for supplying a large part of Delhi the good quality of the power and making our life simpler. So I won't be repeating what I have said. What is needed is that for implementing the demand response, maybe some investment is required, management tools are required, technology is required, and moreover, whatever the best practices are available, say among the DISCOMs of Delhi or the DISCOMs and the power utilities elsewhere, that need to be collated, that need to be analyzed, and considering the terrain and the geographical conditions, and rather I would say the climatic conditions, the suitable methods may be implemented. So we have Sri Ganesh Das with us, and one of the question is, respecting Ganesh Das ji, there have been several demand response pilots implemented in the past in the country, behavioral, manual or automated demand response. Tata Power is one of the pioneers, and they have implemented pilots under their service areas. So based on your experience, how would you see the DR helping Indian DISCOMs?
Thank you for your question. So our experience, as I mentioned that when we did automated demand response, when we integrated C&I customers by using smart meters, where the technology played a larger role than the consumer, because consumer, of course, participated, they informed us, they gave their agreement to participate on an, when we reach them few hours back or one day ahead. But at the same time, this technology played a significant role. And now the behavioral response, now today, if you really see the very interesting connect is, both the cases technology played a role. On one side, you have technology predominantly functioning at the utility side, and maybe to a limited extent at the customer side when you are controlling the devices or the equipments. And if you look at today, there is an element of technology which operates at a consumer side also. You've got digitization, the consumer has got some tools, he can see through the mobile, participate in a different way, and can do it on their own, and then also can control the temperature. Today you have got devices wherein you can through the mobile control the temperature of your air conditioners, speed of the fans, light intensity, etc. So the technology plays a very interesting role in either cases, the behavioral and demands. My answer is that it has to be a combination of both. The automated demand response wherever it is possible, because there is a very classical requirement for demand response. And Kulbhushan also has mentioned that when you are managing that, it is very important to know your base load, your capacity, that how much of the capacity is available on a particular network for a demand response, and at what point in time that capacity is available. For instance, we are in India, we have got 15-minute slots. So at every 15-minute slot, we potentially should know that what kind of a demand response capability is available at that network, and how much time we will take that to enable that demand response. Because otherwise what will happen is it is not going to serve that kind of a purpose. So that is the kind of thing we should have. So the two things which are extremely important is to understand your demand curve and demand in a very, very nitty-gritty, you have to understand. And also you have to understand your supply, depend how if a generator is going to back down, then for advance that next day it is not going to be available, so you can enable a demand response. But if the generator is going to break down, then it will require for a different kind of a reaction. So the whole idea is, whatever is the method we choose, whether it is automated or behavioral or manual, but it's important to have a complete understanding of the network as well as the peak requirement at different point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh Das ji. Just a brief remark on this. You have nicely explained that what is the importance of the load curve and the base load. Here also, the utilities faces the challenges that sometimes there are exigencies, and maybe at that time certain extreme measures need to be taken. So it's also part of the regulations, and certain things should be built in for the protection of the utilities also. So maybe some power cuts may be there for few moments or few minutes or say half an hour or 1 hour. So that is also a reality, and we in India should also face it when there is a real emergency or there are some fault conditions and the conditions going beyond limit, because each and every equipment and each and every circuit has its own limit, and how much that can be overloaded even for a short while. Those are well known in advance, and a corrective action need to be taken. Now, Dadhit ji, in VIPL, you have implemented some demand response pilot. According to you, are the key challenges in scaling up DR programs, and how do you see regulations will help in addressing these challenges?
Yeah, thank you, sir. And so our experience with the demand response goes back to 7-8 years in timeline, and we started with manual demand response program in perhaps 2016-18, and we achieved around 50 megawatt of cumulative demand response during the different events. And after that, we switched over to automated demand response. First, a few buildings of our offices were selected where we installed the controllers for the air conditioning units. And then currently we are in the process of carrying out demand response, automated demand response for domestic consumers with the help of Schneider India. And I'm happy that the report for which will be published in next month. So we will be able to know the results of that as well. So as far as our experience goes, 2-3 quick points here. That first is that onboarding of consumers, or you may call it the awareness or outreach activity, is still a big challenge. Even we have faced this challenge for our employees as well, because the last phase of demand response automated domestic side we have implemented at our Urja Vihar colony, and there were so many questions from our employee side as well. So we can understand that onboarding of consumers is going to be tough without that level of awareness and outreach activities. Secondly, as Ganesh Das ji mentioned, that it's important to understand your load curve. You have to identify which section of your tariff category is contributing towards the peak. Then if you direct your demand response program to that particular tariff category, it will bring maximum results. In Delhi, if I talk about, then obviously the day peak in summer months and specifically the night peak around 11 o'clock or midnight is due to cooling load of the domestic consumers. So you have to direct your demand response program towards that particular tariff category only. You can't design a program including C&I consumer and expect load relief during night hours, because there are no industries or very low commercial establishment running. So it's important that you study your load research carefully and derive some results out of that, which exactly is the category who is contributing towards the delta which is causing problem. Thirdly, M&V has been a challenge so far in our experience, the measurement and verification exact value of the demand response or the reduction is in load, because if you take the demand response period as half an hour, then there could be some load as well which will be naturally dying, or some alteration in the load profile. So you have to understand the consumer load curve on the daily basis, seasonal basis as well. Then only you can monitor and verify that exact amount of demand response and provide the incentive based on that. So these were 3-4 major challenges we faced, and with the right kind of interventions from the regulatory side and other things, we feel that the demand response regulations will be soon available to DISCOMs, and it can be scaled up. One more thing is that it will be viable for us if we include the demand response program as a part of our day-ahead power purchase planning, because until unless you do that, it will be just like an emergency, tackling emergency situation. Suppose today I am planning for the next day and I can keep a 10 megawatt buffer for the demand response for particular 1 hour or half an hour. So until unless that becomes part of my power purchase planning and it is assured to me, it may be through aggregator or through some other means, then only it helps me, not only in power purchase planning, but also in network planning as well. Because until unless I am not sure, then I cannot plan, I cannot take risk with my network capacity augmentation, just imagining that I will be getting this much of load relief through demand response. So these are some of the key points from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Dadhik ji. I know you have a vast experience and so many things you wanted to tell, but time is not permitting you. So you have applied the demand response on that also. Thank you. And now I invite Dangi ji. See, Rajesh Dangi ji, he is a able regulator and doing many marvelous tasks. So the question to him is that certain percentages or the certain targets are to be fixed as to the savings in terms of kilowatt and kilowatt hour, and how these percentage savings would be affecting and how the load would be met. So what is your perspective in setting these targets for the kilowatt and kWh?
Thank you, sir. Before we can set any targets, at least we should have the background information of how much demand can be reduced. And second, since we have no regulations, Electricity Act has been there since last 20 years. No commission has made any regulations regarding these demand response. The reason being is we don't have complete information how much demand can be reduced. Once that can be clearly brought out, then only targets can be fixed. And most important part is legal strength which the Commission can get in framing those regulations. There is no such specific clause in the Electricity Act also to frame regulations for DR. Although it is a good concept, it is being done by the DISCOM voluntarily on their own to reduce their peak demand, to reduce the stress on their infrastructure, to reduce capex for their new investment and new lines. But from the regulator side, it will be possible if we have background data and how much demand can be reduced and how it can be reduced, availability of smart meters, availability of smart devices at reasonable cost. Tata has been doing some good switching. They have voluntarily installed some devices in the air conditioners by virtue of which they are able to switch off the EC when there is a peak. This is voluntary being done presently, but we don't have much of background information how much this can be implemented and what support is required from the regulator except for this hedging of your risks. Any other support, otherwise this can be done by the DISCOM on its own also. But if regulations are required and law permits them, that can always be enforced and can be notified.
Thank you, Dangiji. Actually, there was one more question to you, but you have already replied. So there will not be any need to ask that question. The question was that RPO targets are set and whether these targets will help. So naturally, he has concluded right now that these targets will really help. But challenge before the utilities is that they are supposed to supply the electricity in demanded quantity and where it is demanded in the required quantum and at any time. So that challenge versus this demand response challenge, these are some constraints or these are the two opposite requirements. Anyway, utilities are getting successful and they are managing also.
That can be done through financial models like time of day tariffs. People can be made to shift through that. If their electricity bill is going to come lesser, definitely they will shift. TOD hours can be changed if required. These things can be done to reduce the peak.
Thank you, Rangiji. The related question to the utility you just mentioned, Tata Power, Ganesh Das ji, how can utilities be incentivized for increasing uptake of DR program? One side is incentive to the consumers, not consuming during the peak time, but how utilities can be incentivized for implementing such programs?
You see, from the utility point of view, if you look at it, it's a very strong model. Many of the things are passed through and it's a cost. So essentially, if there is a technology investment, if the technology investment is allowed to be capitalized, I think that is itself is a good incentive to do that. But actually, if you really look at this demand response, that kind of demand response we did 10 years back and the situation when BSES also did around that time and now is very different. Today, you have got a lot of empowerment. You would have seen some presentation on the blockchain. So many times, and if you look at let me take a classical example of the telecom model. Though telecom has a regulation, but many of the things are done through a market forces. Now, what we are trying to do is, Kulbhushan, the presentation actually what you made, I have that point, that, let us not try to regulate everything. Let the market let us create a market. And how do we create a market? The market is created when the customer sees a value. As Ashokji has asked me that when utility sees a value, when the technology provider sees a value. And automatically, you know, for instance, if a consumer is there, the consumer has a solar rooftop, he has got some panels, the consumer knows the demand, consumer knows how much he is generating. Now, instead of going through an aggregator model, the consumer can operate through a blockchain model, you know. So that is also another technology we need to have. The aggregator model was something which used to be there some years back. And then if you look at the behavioral demand response, what we did with AutoGrid, that also we try to look at an aggregator model where everything is aggregated and you try to control through that. But again, you know, when you are doing an aggregator model, you are also sharing. So therefore, what I would say that, very specifically replying to Ashokji's question, that what we will do is, if there is a technology which can be invested and we get a return, that is, I mean, the whole idea is how do you really serve the consumer better. So if you are investing on technology, it is approved by the regulator. And by the way, let me also compliment the Delhi regulator. You know, you would find many of the technologies has been developed first time or approved first time by the Delhi regulator. If you look at smart meters, if you look at demand response programs, if you look at battery energy storage system, a lot of things, you know, Delhi regulator has been very progressive and supporting. So all they have to do is to give an approval, not a regulation is required all the time, because every time if you start making regulation means, you know, you are actually splitting hair too much on that. So I would say that the incentive is you should allow technology implementation to happen in a natural form. Thank you.
Very true, sir. And whatsoever this base document for the regulations, for DR regulations have been prepared, I'm not, really, frankly, I have not gone through the complete one. Maybe this particular aspect is also covered there. Basically, adoption of technology is the need of the hour, and system requires continuous upgradation. Gone were the days when the distribution transformers were quite, having lower efficiency, and now with the star rating and the quality control order on the distribution transformers, so they are having a higher standards of efficiency and performance. So this is just one simple example I gave, but there are many other examples. Now the days are coming when the AI applications will be in an extensive form in the power sector, and those who are the progressive utilities, they will also make use of it. And at the same time, the living standards of the consumers are increasing, and they will be consuming relatively more. And our country is not saturated with the power growth. Demand growth is there. So the utilities have to invest more to meet the rising demands. Similarly, from the generating end and from the grid end, the enormous requirement, or you can say the more stress will be there, but things can be managed when they are well planned, designed, constructed and implemented. And after that, the suitable operation. So here we realize and we remember our Sri S.C. Saxena ji from Grid Controller of India, who is quite responsible to provide us the electricity in required quantity and at all the places in the country, and he will share his experiences. So regarding this particular RE integration, the upcoming load of the EVs, future plans, and naturally one of the things with the electricity demand, and that to the continuous demand on this one, hydrogens. And today also and yesterday also there were in the news that the semiconductor chip manufacturing plants, how much reliable power is needed there, that we know. And as far as my knowledge goes, it was because that we were not having one of the essential component, that is a very high quality and the quantum of power to be supplied uninterruptedly to such chip making plants. So those were the limitations. So grid controller naturally will have a major role in making the things simpler, but their job is challenging. So let Saxena ji throw some light on various aspects how we can succeed.
Right. Thank you, sir. At the outset, thanks to ISGF. My voice is a little hoarse. Please excuse me for that. So, thanks to ISGF for this opportunity to speak here. I think all of us are very well aware that we have met the record high demand of 240 gigawatt last year. And this year we are preparing to meet somewhere around 260 gigawatt, and it is going to be a big challenge. The main challenge, is changing. Traditional definition of the peak hour is changing, in fact. If you look at the peak is now occurring during solar hours, whereas the major challenge, the bigger challenge lies in meeting the non-peak, non-solar hour peak demand that we face. As an example, I would say that last year when it was 240 in solar hours, non-solar hours was 218. And solar, we were touching around 40 gigawatt or so. You can imagine that kind of power disappearing during the non-solar hours, and we have to meet that. So non-solar is the time when we really need this support. We have been procuring various kind of flexible generation to meet the demand. But I think here again, the conventional thinking must change. Earlier, we were having generation, having a supply obligation to meet the demand compulsorily. Now, and now with penetration of RE, we started talking of flexible generation, so as to be able to absorb RE and to cater to the demand. We would soon come to a stage when this may not be enough. We would need to look at flexibilizing the demand side also. And demand response is nothing but flexible demand. You provide the right incentive, you provide the right mechanisms, and you will get the flexible demand. And going forward, we have RE penetration, but then EVs, electric vehicles, distributed behind the meter resources, all these are going to play a very important load. In future, we are also going to have large concentrated loads like green hydrogen, data centers, crypto mining loads, and they are said to be good potentials for demand response. Even today, from a market's perspective, if you see, we have a market wherein the demand, large industries participate in the electricity market. In a way, they are responding to the price signals in the electricity market, and if you see, they manage to defer or run their own captive generation during high price hours. So in a way, they are responsive to the price, and this is what we look at when we talk of demand response. The demand must respond to the price signals, and they do so. So going forward, of course, this is going to be the way to go, demand response. And while I have heard a lot of speakers speaking about retail consumer level demand, let us also appreciate that while we go to that level, we would need distribution system operators as well, because they would be having the more visibility at that ground level. As at the bulk level, while we have complete visibility, we do not have the right visibility at the distribution level. So we would need distribution system operators too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And now I invite Sri Amit Parihar ji. He will be telling that what has been the experience in implementation of a DR pilot in JVBNL, Rajasthan. So please explain and throw some light on your experience.
Thanks a lot, sir. So if I take left turn or see on the left side or right side, or even if I see on the front or even on the back also, if you see the kind of logo, I feel privileged to be a part of this gathering. And therefore, I would like to thank ISGF, GIZ team and GT for this opportunity. So I'm representing a regional philanthropic organization, Shakti Foundation, and what we are trying to do is basically we are working with a range of stakeholders to enable this whole ecosystem for large-scale climate change, deployment of large-scale climate change solutions. And in the process, then we certainly work with a range of stakeholders, including government, think tanks, industry, academia, and other partners. And for us, this is one of the important things, this whole discussion around whether it is demand-side management or demand response, because in our overall journey to kind of support government on achieving 500 gigawatt target, this is one of the important area, and therefore Shakti has been kind of doing this thing. I feel this whole discussion around demand side management or demand response, I mean, when we talk about energy transition, we say we expect certain things from government. We say MNRE should come up with this thing, or Ministry of Power should do this thing, or we expect something from other DISCOMs. But I feel this is also one of the initiative where consumer can also kind of make some contribution, and they can also make themselves part of this whole journey around energy transition. In terms of demand response, we have seen a lot of discussion. What we have seen is there is a lot of change in the ecosystem. We started from curtailment, and then now we are talking about using this as a tool to kind of enable more of RE. But I feel few of the challenges still remains, and these challenges are very well known. The first one is around, sir also asked the question around what is the benefit to the DISCOM. The second is around what is there for consumers. That's the second challenge. And at Shakti, what we have been trying to do is basically trying to address some of these challenges by doing or working with partners on actual or kind of pilot demonstration of these things. And that's where we work with the Tata Power on the behavioral demand response thing. And we had a lot of success. I mean, if you see, first phase of the program was around 2,000 consumers, but in the second phase, we were able to kind of go to 26,000. And the kind of savings we were able to have from these 12 to 16 events, it was in the range of somewhere around 70 to 80 megawatt. And clear case where we talk about what is the benefit for consumer, what is the benefit for the DISCOM. So that was the idea, to establish that proof, and that is what we try to do. In terms of few of the other things, what we need to do is, I also feel like in this changing scenario, we need to, in terms of our thinking, when we talk about solution, we need to go beyond existing solutions, and that's where I like this idea of aggregator. Although I'll slightly disagree with the sir. I mean, I feel this aggregator could be a good thing, because what happens is whenever we are trying to do something with consumers, whether it is residential or for that matter even some of the industries, you need a lot of effort to kind of do a follow-up with them, make them understand like this is going to be beneficial for you. Now if we are expecting like whether utilities can do it or someone else can do it with residential consumers, that is going to be difficult, and that's where I feel aggregator model could be a kind of game changer. The second thing I also feel is in terms of solutions. So when we talk about DR things, certainly technology is going to play a good role. And in residential segment, we have got technologies, cost may not be so high, but when it comes to C&I segment, the cost of the technology is going to be high. And when we talk about higher cost, certain investment, that's where we need to have some innovative business models. Can we talk about on-bill financing kind of model where DISCOM is again kind of making some contribution around that, just to have payment security kind of mechanism. So that's what I feel. I also wanted to talk about quickly, sir, you mentioned about the Rajasthan example. I mean, I discussed this Tata thing because this was a recent one. We have also done a pilot demonstration on time of use tariff, which is slightly dynamic in nature. So what we did was first we supported the overall framework for this time of use tariff, and then the idea was to do a pilot demonstration. And this is what we have done in Uttar Pradesh. ISGF was our partner. So that's the role as a philanthropy we are playing. Some of the challenges which are there in the ecosystem, we try to kind of address these challenges through these pilot demonstrations. So thank you, sir.
Just one point I wanted to add, because you see the role of Shakti was very important in our behavioral demand response, because that incentive the customer, that is something which regulator will not allow us to pay, because it will get into a lot of controversies and all. So we were trying to figure out that, because that's one of the biggest piece. How do you really encourage customer to participate without incentive? And that is where Shakti came in, and then they took that part of, managing the customers and managing their reward and everything. I think that is a big piece. And Ashokji, when you ask that, what is that we require? I think that kind of a connect is what has to come from the regulator to support the demand response, nothing from the utility side per se. Thank you.
I think market forces should control these. Hello. I think market forces should encourage, because we are moving from a state-owned DISCOMs to regulated one, and then to the market-controlled forces. So gradually, we should not go back to the regulated. We keep on regulating everything.
That is exactly what I had mentioned, that we should go to market. But when you are sandboxing a technology, this thing, so there that support is required. And you had also supported by agreeing to take us do that, because you cannot also cut the customer's power just like that unless until you give us an approval. But this is the part which helped us to take it to this, that 16, and you see the result is huge. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Dangi ji. So next we seek the response from Avinash ji, who is from VRPL, and we are talking one of the very important element, that is the consumers. How the consumer participation can be increased in demand response activities. And before that, my opening remark for this particular question will be, say if the consumer is aware and he is assured that the power will be available, that there will be electricity, say 24 hours or 22 hours, he can be induced to the DR participation. But when the consumer know, as the days were earlier, now those days are not there, that the power will be available only say during certain hours of the day. So that time the tendency was to put whatsoever the load or whatsoever the requirement were there, and system was having the peak, experiencing the peak of different time. So it is basically the demand, it is basically the need, and that drives the consumer behavior, that how much assured he is that the reliable power is available. Say if he defers say for 2 hours, so he can put in his load or her load after say 2 hours of the period and contribute to the energy basket of the country or whatsoever the environmental benefits to the country. So Avinash ji, please share your experience how to increase the consumer participation in the process of demand response.
Thank you, sir. When we are talking about the utility-led demand response program, we have conducted the several pilot, including the automated demand response program with a small scale consumers. What we have observed that the adoptability of the template, demand response template, there are several technology available to control the consumer's load. Like you can switch off the AC as well as you can reduce the temperature of the AC also. So what type of demand response would you like to implement? That is more important, and that is giving the adaptability from the consumer side and willingness to participate in the demand response program. So the right template to be fixed, and with that right template, there should not be a compromise with the comfort level of the consumer. If we are giving some program, we are designing some program, we are saying that we should control the non-essential load. So is the AC, and AC is the peak load contributor in the BRPL area, it is well known fact, because night is more peaker than the day peak. So if we are saying that AC is non-essential load for the consumer, consumer is adopting that statement. He is operating the AC for their comfort. And we are saying we should control their AC by switching off their AC. So when we have conducted the survey, what we have observed that more consumers are interested to reduce their temperatures, increase their temperature set point instead of switching off their appliances. So we have to set the right template, convince the consumer to adopt the demand response program, and create awareness among the consumer. Second thing, when any program, when the consumer are participating, they will ask us naturally what are the monetary benefit from that program. So we should fix the incentive mechanism, and there are several pilot conducted. Some somewhere the incentive is given different rate, like 4 rupees per unit saving, 3 rupees per unit saving. Some part it is giving 2 rupees, 1 rupee. There should be some fixed framework to incentivize the consumer when we are talking about the set of the consumer like residential or industrial or commercial. So it will give the confidence to the consumer as well as it will give the adaptability for the consumer to participate in the demand response program.
Rightly said, sir. The need prevails over the model. क्या ज़रूरत है वो उसका महत्व ज़्यादा होता है कंज्यूमर के लिए रादर के हमेशा वो मॉडल और पॉकेट को ही देखता रहे पॉकेट भी मीनिंग करती है बट व्हेन ही कैन सेक्रीफाइस सम ऑफ हिज कंफर्ट्स नॉट द होल कंफर्ट so that is I think the guiding message you want to do and many research papers are there. It depends on the society, which type of the society is there, whether very affluent society, very say mediocre society, and what is their culture and behavior. So it's a complex issue, involves electricity, which in itself is complex, and also involves the behavior and the habits of various type of the consumers, and among a house also, the different type of the priorities given by individual resident also there. So let us ask the advice of Saxena ji. In this particular operating model, one suggestion has been made about the DR aggregator and also for the purpose, for some energy management purpose, the QCA are also there. So these qualified coordinating agencies, can they also do or can they also be assigned the job of the aggregator or a separate aggregator would be required? Please express your views on this aspect.
Right, thank you, sir. QCA is the Qualified Coordinating Agency for the purposes of scheduling of aggregation of RE. Maybe mainly it is being used for a generation side aggregation. Strictly speaking, QCA does the job of scheduling, metering, accounting, settlement, pooling and depooling of charges and all those kind of commercial activities on behalf of all those generators who are connected in that aggregation point or pooling station or whatever we might call it. Strictly speaking, this may not be the right model for a demand response aggregator. We would need a separate demand response aggregator who is not only conversant with the demand side, but is also active in the market. He should be able to bid and place orders in the market. He should be able to procure and sell in the market. Both the things, he should be able to supply his consumers at a cheaper price or maybe look at alternate sourcing, maybe encourage them for demand response. And use of technology is the other quality that this kind of aggregator requires. He would need to use a lot of technology to be able to not only implement the physical controls on the behalf of the participants, but also use for this for information, for markets. And the third thing that the DR aggregator would require is the education side, the constant training side, the awareness side that has to be done for all these participation. He has to carry out the analysis, the behavior analysis, advise the consumer that this would be your best way, this is how you can maximize your payoff and participate in the demand side. In the markets as well. So strictly speaking, we require a different set of skill set, different maybe financial prudence which a regulator would be doing for a QCA would be different from that of a DR aggregator. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, sir, for clarifying the different roles which the QCA right now is performing and which the aggregator would be assigned in future. The aggregator would also have in team a clear person, a very good person and the very good team who understand the need of the consumers and who can understand what the society wants and what sociological conditions are there. Rather, techno-economically he can judge with the help of the technology and others, but human behavior had to be based on the responses, based on the interaction and how he is disseminating the information and how he is convincing that whatsoever the demand response programs and other things are there, how these will be beneficial to them as well as to the utility. So I think we can conclude here if the organizer permits. And my closing remark is, I will say that the program has been good, and maybe because I am part here, so I would certainly say it is very good and more than my expectations. And you yourself can judge, you can discuss, and you people got a wonderful experience of interacting so many persons, of the like-minded persons and the professionals in this particular field. And we are going to be not a new thing, but will be assuming the newer dimensions. So with that, I would be closing with the particular note that we have to adopt higher and higher technology. Since my career started with generation, I know how difficult it is to generate electricity, and also switched over to the distribution in the central government. Because this is almost 40 years journey now, by now. Always we kept on saying that distribution is a neglected subject. No investment is being made to the distribution. So those are things we can say 20 years back. Things changed. We focused more on generation. When we saw that the generation has been delicensed and a lot of investment is coming in that, then our attention also went to the improving the health of the DISCOMs, as well as also the improving the infrastructure and the technology part. Because what was happening, say, wires, poles and wires were being extended, distribution transformer being extended, but the IT part or digitalization of these systems were far away. Since we were lagging in that, and now more and more things and more funds are being infused into the distribution system through various schemes, and also the private utilities, they are doing their best, I would say, and setting examples for others. So this chain has to continue, and they also need to be protected through good regulatory measures. Standard of performance they are meeting, and but at the same time the consumer expectations and the quantum the consumers are consuming, quantum of electricity as well as the incident demand in the form of the peak, which our Saxenergy is managing somehow. So these are the things. So naturally energy conservation, energy efficiency, and this achieving these through demand response. These are the key constituents, or you can say the three key elements which the utilities and the professional, either the regulator or the policy makers, they have to do. And one more thing at the cost of repetition, the standardization has to be there. If there is a standardization in the technology, it's a win-win situation. It offers a win-win situation for each and everyone. Thank you. Thank you for patience listening.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session, and moderating it so good. So now, may I request Rajput sir, you to please facilitate the distinguished speakers, because you are the senior from my history side. I don't have anybody to help me out here. So I request Rajput sir to please facilitate Saxena sir, Executive Director, Grid Controller of India Limited. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Now I request, sir, you to please facilitate Rajesh Dangi, sir, who is Secretary, Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Now I request, sir, you to please facilitate Mukesh Dadi, sir, who is Head Sustainability and Clean Technology, BSS Yamuna Power Limited. Ganesh Das, sir, who is Chief Collaboration and Innovation, Tata Power Company Limited. Thank you, sir. Amit Kumar Singh, sir, who is Director, Clean Power Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. Avinash Kumar sir, who's AVP BSS Rajdhani Power Limited. Thank you, sir. Now may I request Saxena sir to please facilitate Rajput sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful support. So we have also facilitation for GIZ, who has been very supportive for us. So may I request Sunil Sharma sir to please facilitate the team of GIZ. So sir, may I request you to please facilitate Kulbhushan sir. Thank you so much, sir. And Rajesh Jangi sir, can you please facilitate? Sir. Sunil Sharma sir, he is project manager AV Indo-German, GIZ. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you all so much, sir, for your support and a wonderful workshop. Now may I request all of you to please stand for a group photograph. So you can also please join, sir.